I mean, if you look at schools, it's basically a flat increase. If you look at health, a little bit better, perhaps. Look at defence, and you saw all the row that Liam Fox had, letters being leaked by somebody, going into demand from the Prime Minister, 8%. I would have thought that the priority for policing would have actually been much greater than it is, than is currently reflected. I am really quite astonished at 20%. And you can see what's happened with the announcement of over 1,000 officers to be lost in Manchester, North Wales over 200, West Midlands over 1,100, and that's without counting police staff, without looking at what happens to police community support officers. And as Simon says, and Roger will no doubt mention, people talked about 12% possibility of efficiency savings being able to be made. But actually, this is much bigger than that. And the APA, of course, wrote yesterday to the Home Office saying it's not only the scale of the cuts, it's if you front-load the cuts in the way they are doing, 6% in the first year, 8% in 12-13, which is Olympics year. That, of course, means that the 12% that HMI talked about was over 4 years, and the premise was changing in working practices, changing in the way services were delivered. That takes time to deliver, and as the APA said, even if you want us to reduce some level of cuts, and we accept that, we need time to deliver it. And yesterday they asked for that particular aspect of it to be reopened. And in Parliament yesterday, the Shadow Home Secretary said that we ought to reopen not only the way in which the cuts are being implemented with respect to the police service, but actually the whole spending settlement for the police needs to be looked at again. And certainly, from our point of view, that's what we'll be saying. The cuts are too fast and they're too deep and will impact inevitably on the front line. And we want the Minister, the Home Secretary, to think again. We also need to decide what we actually mean by policing. And all of us do it, and I'm guilty, and I plead guilty, Simon, somewhat to talking about the visible policing on the street being important. And of course it is. But when we talk about policing and frontline policing, we should also make sure that we talk about not only the visible police on the street, but that we recognise that there are also other officers who are on the front line who may not be the visible Bobby on the street. And we also, and I was talking to Tim Hollis, the Chief Constable in Humberside, who said to me that a much better term would be the use of the term of operational policing. Because alongside the visible front line, many of us in this hall today will have campaigned for specialist officers to do with domestic violence, to do with sexual violence, to do with rape, and of course the important work of detectives and CID. They're frontline officers, and we need to recognise them as such. And I would be very disappointed and upset and think it would be a real step backwards if in the demand to ensure that we have visible policing on the street, important as that is, that we actually then start to undermine some of these other specialist officers who many of us have campaigned for years to ensure that a woman who suffers domestic violence has got an officer trained to deal with them, and we need to make sure that we don't throw the baby out with the bathwater. Just very quickly, in talking about the National Crime Agency, I'm not sure how the National Crime Agency will work. It's supposed to be an operational body established in 2013, and yet the MPIA is supposed to go into it. But the MPIA is abolished in 2012. So there's a gap. I'm not quite sure what happens to the functions of the MPIA. You can abolish the MPIA, but you can't abolish its functions. And many of its functions are really important, but they wouldn't what you'd call to be operational. So a big debate, I think, to come about what the National Crime Agency will actually look like and what it will actually mean, and what the MPIA's functions going into it will actually do for it as an operational police unit. Let me just say a little bit also about elected police and crime commissioners. I think this is a bad idea. I don't think that the status quo is as good as it could be. I don't think we should be complacent and say that accountability is exactly where we want it to be. But to have one individual elected to represent a whole force area, I think brings with it many problems. You will be well aware of some of those problems. An elected mandate to do X and then goes to the Chief Constable and says, we want you to do X, and the Chief Constable says, operationally, I don't think that that is the right thing to do. What happens? We're reassured that, of course, that won't happen. Everybody will be grown up. Everybody will be an adult about it. But I think there's very real dangers about it. The second thing is I'm not sure that actually the accountability that's at issue is actually at a force level. Again, if you talk to members of Parliament and talk to, not just me, but others, and you talk to the police, the accountability issue that people have usually comes at a neighbourhood and street level. So, for example, in my own constituency, I don't get people coming to me and say, Mr. Coaker, I'm absolutely distraught about Nottinghamshire Police's counter-terrorist strategy. Or come to me and say, I'm absolutely distraught about serious unorganised crime. They come to me and say, we're fed up with that. There's a car continually been in the car park of the pub. We've reported it on numerous occasions and it seems that nothing happens. Or they come to me and say, Mr. Coaker, there's an alleyway just down the road. There's groups of kids in there. They're getting booze from somewhere. We're not quite sure where it is. We think it's X. And we've reported it and nothing's happened. It's those sorts of quality of life issues at a neighbourhood level that if you said to me, how would we want to make the police more accountable, that would be the level at which people in my own constituency and from my own experience across the country actually say is the sort of area that they want to see improved accountability. And in fact, I think the police recognise that in partnership with local authorities, in partnership with health, in partnership with youth services, in partnership with all of those people. If we improve and build on some of the work that's been done in the best partnerships, that is where people wish to see accountability improved and influence on policing. Can I just say as well, I just want to say two other things very briefly in the couple of minutes that this clock tells me I've got left. I cannot stress enough my own view about the police cannot solve many of these issues or deal with these issues on their own. I am extremely concerned that whilst, Simon, we talked about the police budget cuts, that you can only imagine that if some of the local authority services are withdrawn, some of the domestic violence refuges, some of the homelessness hostels, some of the youth provision, all of those things start to disappear. What I think will happen is that those people who would have been dealt with by those services won't go away. What are they going to do? What would I do if, as a member of the public, it was on a Sunday afternoon or a Sunday evening and there was somebody who clearly had mental health issues or some other issues was on my street and causing a problem? I'll tell you what people will do. They'll ring 999. And I just worry that actually it's not only the impact of the budget on the police itself, it's the impact that the diminution and taking away of other services will have on the police, on the police and the demands on their time. So that's one area that I think needs a lot more debate and discussion as we move forward, and perhaps you'll consider in terms of modernising police. The other area that I think is really important and often doesn't get talked about, and is something that I will raise with my opposition colleagues, but also will try and hold the government to account by, is this. I think that we talk about the police, and we talk about the need to modernise policing, and we talk about prevention and so on. I think there's a much, much greater need for us to consider how we ensure that there's a much greater liaison link, if you like, between policing and the criminal justice system. And I think that is about prevention, but it is about trying again to look at how we reduce the rates of reoffending, the disillusionment and despair it causes to somebody being continually arrested, coming off the streets for a little while and then reappearing, not only to the confidence of the police, but also to the confidence of local communities. Reoffending rates have fallen, but they're still far too high, and we need to try and understand what more effective work can be done with respect to that to actually deal with that problem. So the criminal justice system and its impact, I think, is really important. So I didn't want to come here and make a speech, Simon. I just wanted to come and share some thoughts and some ideas with you. But I'm grateful for the opportunity of having been able to spend a few minutes talking to you. I hope some of what I said is thought-provoking, because the idea of these conferences isn't necessarily for someone to come and say, these are all the answers, but it's for somebody to come and say, these are some of the issues, these are some of the things that we need to tackle, and these are some of the things we need to do if we want to achieve what all of us want, which is to continue to see crime fall, to see how we modernise policing within the new environment in which we are, and do that in a way which takes account of the views of everyone. Thank you very much indeed.